So yes, thank you guys. I'm really excited to talk through resume writing best practices today. We're going to go through kind of section by section on what you can do to really write a standout resume. And I also have access to free templates so that you guys can do this on your own after the session. So at the end of the session, I'll share the link and you can download the templates of something that we'll be going through together today. That way you can kind of section by section write your own standout resume or CV. So I'm really excited to share this with you. At the end, we'll have time for questions and answers. Those questions can include anything about LinkedIn profiles and cover letters as well, because I know, part of the job search process is not just resumes, so I'm happy to answer questions about anything in that nature as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing now, and we will get started here. About education and certifications, additional information that you can add, and then some general resume tips that I'd like to talk about, some things that we can do to avoid, common mistakes or to, questions that I see come up a lot. So we'll talk about some general things at the end. So when we're talking about the summary section, I wanted to kind of give you a quick overview of every section that is going to be included in here. This is the top third of the first page of the resume, and this is a really, really important part of the document because it really helps you to position your experience for the job. So, while your experience kind of is what it is, in the rest of the document, this section you can really customize for each application. And so we're going to dig into these things one at a time, but I kind of wanted to give you an overview of what the whole top third of the resume can look like. So job title at the very top, this would be your name at the very top of the document, then the job title, and that's the job title you're seeking, not necessarily the job title you have currently. So if you're seeking, an office management role or, a head of operations or something like that, you would put that there and try to tailor it to the job description. And then same thing with the summary section, which we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail in a moment. And then the skills, we're going to talk about best practices there too. And then, career achievements are a great thing to add if, say, your highest level achievements maybe aren't at your most recent job, or if you're coming back from a family leave and you've maybe, re-entering the workforce as a mother and you want to really highlight your achievements before they see work dates, this is a great way to pull that up at the very top too. So this is just a quick overview, and then we'll talk about the summary in a little bit more detail. So that summary is a short paragraph, usually 3 or 4 sentences, and it's really detailing your experience and your unique value. So it's not an objective statement. It's something a little bit more specific to, what makes you qualified to do the job that you're applying for. And it also allows you to include that list of key achievements we've just seen, kind of a format of, in case you want to, pull some things up, some highlights at the very top. So it's just something to kind of give the reader a quick overview of, what makes you qualified to apply for the job you're applying for, and what you can bring to the company. It also, if you want to think about it in a way of the resume, they're just going to read it really, really quickly. So make sure that you don't put too much information in there. Make sure it's not a huge block of text. 7 or 8 lines of text is way too much. People aren't going to read all that. We want to make sure as we're writing our resumes that we're keeping it to the highest level information, the most relevant information, and easy to read through quickly, because we can't expect anyone to actually take the time to read our content, and we don't want any of our important experience or details to get lost in the mix. So, 3 or 4 lines is really about perfect. Anything longer than that gets a little bit overwhelming. Maybe you can break it up a little bit. But that's the summary section in a nutshell. And then the skills section. The skills section is a really important place to help you tailor your resume to the job. If you pull skills directly from the job description, it'll help you not only position your resume or CV as qualified for the job when the hiring manager or HR person or recruiter reads it, but it also positions your resume to get through applicant tracking systems, ATS systems, keyword scanners when you're applying online. So, it's a really important section to add and then also update for each role, because it really helps you quickly customize your resume and get through the applicant tracking systems. Now, the templates that I've got a link to share with you at the end of the presentation here are all ATS friendly to get through the keyword scanners. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the very end with general resume tips, but I just wanted to bring up that, you know, the format that we're going through today is very ATS friendly. All right, the experience section. This is a section that I see a lot of room for improvement, especially with women, because, you know, talking about our experience and our accomplishments is not something that comes very comfortably to most of us. So this is really where I like to spend a little bit of time talking, because so for the experience section, this is one of, you know, this just kind of gives you an overview of what one job would look like. So company name, your dates, your job title, and then I like to add a couple of lines at the very top, like right after the job title, that kind of gives a little bit of context about what your role was, what the company does, you know, size of your team, if you're a manager, or who you report to, you know, as far as their level, things like that, to give people an understanding of what you did. Not necessarily a huge list of responsibilities, but a quick overview of what your work was, what the company does, the size of the company, to give your reader context to what your accomplishments really mean. And so after that, then your accomplishments or your bullets, you know, I see a lot of people add their, you know, either phrases directly from their current job description or just tactical duties that they have to do. But that's not really helpful in terms of showing your value to the employer. Really what you want to show is any quantifiable results to what you did. You know, did you help, you know, increase sales, cut costs in some way, make a process more efficient? Did you change the way they had been doing business in any way that helped them be more successful? And, you know, avoid general phrases like responsible for, and instead start every bullet with an action verb like led, drove, managed, you know, developed, collaborated, anywhere where you can start a bullet with something stronger than, you know, assisted or helped, or, you know, something that really shows that you were able to take ownership of something. If you're early in your career, you know, if you're just finishing university, then something like assisted or, you know, things like that are more appropriate, because that's probably where you were at in your internships and things like that. But, you know, if you're looking for a leadership role, make sure that we're really starting our bullets strong. And then also lead each bullet with the achievement and then followed up by how you did it. So something like, you know, increase sales by 30% after, you know, developing a plan for prospecting new clients. You know, so don't start with the developed a plan to prospect new clients that resulted in 30% increase in sales, because really that achievement is what they want to see first. And if people are just scanning through your resume really quickly, they're just going to read the beginning of the bullets anyway. And so you want to make sure you're front loading your bullets with the headline, with what's really most important. And then how you did it can follow up in the back end. So that's kind of best practice in the experience section, you know, just to kind of go over this again, a nice couple of lines about what you did, context of what the company does, give people some information about who, you know, what your role was, maybe why you were promoted to it, why you were hired, things like that, the size of your team, who you reported to, and then quantifiable results, action verbs, and lead each bullet with the most important information. So like I said, I've got this template that physically will walk you through each of these steps, but I did want to talk about some best practices. All right, education and certifications. This is pretty self-explanatory, except I do want to talk a little bit about, you know, making sure that you're adding, you know, your degree titles, make sure that it's very clear. I see some people will list what they studied, but not necessarily the title of the degree or certification. And so it leads the reader to wonder if they completed university or not. If you didn't complete university, that's fine. That's not a problem. But if you did, you want to make sure that it's really clear so that there's no confusion, because I do see that come up a lot. And then the training and certifications. It's great to include any training, certifications, professional development, even conference attendance if you're earlier in your career and you want to kind of bolster that section a little bit. You know, any of these things are great to add as long as they're relevant. You want to make sure that you're including relevant information that isn't detracting from your career story. So if you're changing careers, you want to make sure if you have outdated training or certifications that aren't really important for your new work, you can take some of those things off. All right, in additional information sections, I want to talk about some of these. There's a lot more you can add to your resume to make it, more robust, especially if you're competing for a higher level job, or if you're, competing with all of the new grads coming out of university, things like that. Some of these things include professional memberships. Even if they're past, you can include that they were past, but anything that you were a professional member of at some time. Volunteer work or board leadership. If you're volunteering with an organization, if you have a board role on an organization, as long as the organization isn't controversial or doesn't, raise any red flags with the hiring manager. Sometimes there's things we're involved in that maybe we don't need to list, that we don't need to let everyone know about. And so it's up to you. Make sure that the volunteer work helps show your leadership skills and also adds to your career story. Same with awards and recognition. This is a great way to show the good work that you've done in other organizations. If you're coming out of university, this is great to include, if you won any awards as a student. As you get a little bit further along in your career, say mid-career, you've been out 10 years or so, some of those awards from college and university can maybe fall off because they're no longer relevant to your career. Speaking engagements. This is a great way to show some of the work you've done as a thought leader in your space. So if you have any speaking engagements, media mentions, guest blog posts, podcast experiences, things like that are a really great way to show that you're active, engaged in your industry, that you're staying on top of best practices. Languages, this is always, an important one to include if you speak more than one language. Coming from the US, we're terrible at this. We only speak one language for the most part, but I know most other parts of the world speak more. So it's a great way to include that. And then technical skills. Now, technical skills is a section that not everybody needs depending on your role. I like to split out the technical skills from the skills we saw at the very top of the resume, because the top of the resume is more the higher level skills that are overarching across your whole work. So like office management, budget management, people leadership, things like that, depending on the job you're going for. But the technical skills are the specific programs and systems that you use or you have experience with. And again, only list things that are relevant to the job. So and then Microsoft Office and things like that are now depending on the job you're applying for, may not be necessary to list, because people are going to be expected to know how to use things like, Word and Excel and things like that. But it's really more of the special programs that are relevant to your industry or the work that you do. So the technical skills also will really help with getting through the applicant tracking system as well. So read through the job description, see what they require, and then make sure that you include those things in your technical skills section to help you get through that. All right, I want to talk about some general resume tips. Couple things that I see come up a lot that I want to just kind of talk about best practices, because I want to make sure you guys are really, really successful in getting through not only applicant tracking systems, but making sure that we're getting the attention of the hiring manager. And one of the things I see come up a lot, people ask me about this graphic resume or CV template. I've got an example here for you to the right. So this is it's a modern look. It's interesting. It's one page. It's kind of, sleek and fun to look at. And there's also a lot of free options to build these on your own online. You can take a look at, a bunch of options. I'm happy to share one. Anyway, but what I want to warn you guys against is these types of resumes don't perform well when you apply online. The applicant tracking systems don't know how to read this information because it's just one graphic file, and so it can't read the content. And so if you're going to apply for a role online, the applicant tracking system isn't going to know how to read it, and it's going to kick your application out before a hiring manager ever gets to see it. So if you want a fun resume like this, that's fine, but I suggest having a formal resume, like we kind of went through the sections a moment ago. Have a formal resume that's ATS friendly, and then have this one as more of a networking resume. You can send this to people you know, you can send it to the hiring manager after you've already formally applied as a follow-up. You can send it to, people in your professional network as you're, if you let them know that you're looking. But just know that it's not going to be as effective for you when you're applying online or if you're applying for a formal position. Because the other problem is these are one-page resumes and they don't give a lot, because of all of the graphic design elements to it, they don't give a lot of room to actually add content. And so when you're trying to fit all of your experience into a one-page resume like this, you don't have enough room to add your real value and enough content to show your career story. And so a lot of times, it can be detrimental to really establishing you as a strong candidate for roles when other people are submitting resumes that are a little more robust and a little more filled out with content. So again, there's nothing wrong with this if you want to use it as a networking resume, if you want to use it as a, an extra piece in your portfolio when you go in for interviews, things like that. But just know that it can't be the only tool in your job search toolbox, because there's just a lot of things it can't do. Another thing I see come up a lot is people ask me about resume and CV length. There's a lot of examples on the internet right now, kind of like this one that we're seeing now, that the standard should be a one-page resume, and that's just not true. If you're just coming out of university, then you're probably fine with a one-page resume. But anyone who has more experience than that, who's mid-career or above, it's really, really hard to tell your full career story and get enough content and show your value in a one-page resume. And so a lot of times, to make it fit, I see people lose really valuable content and really valuable accomplishments trying to get it onto one page. And it's fine to go to 2 pages. 3 is even acceptable if you have a lot of, say, education, certifications, speaking engagements. Then maybe a 2-page resume with a 3rd page that's more of an addendum works really well, because that way, you can have a little bit more flexibility with a 2-page versus a 3-page that includes some publications, things like that. So just don't feel like you need to be bound by getting everything onto one page. It's a lot better for you if it's readable, if it's expanded a little bit, if people can, read through it quickly, and it's not so crowded with information just trying to stuff it onto one page. The other thing is, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. A page and a half, 2.5 pages, that's fine too. You don't want to have just a couple lines on another page, and then have it end, but you don't have to have a full 2nd page. You could have a page and a half, and that's acceptable. That's not a problem. It's more about the quality of information than it is about the amount of information. So just make sure, and about the quality, I do want to talk a little bit about making sure that we're only including information that's relevant. So a lot of times, maybe you have a side business, or you have had roles earlier in your career that aren't really necessary, or adding to your career story now. Those are things you can leave out. You don't have to feel like you have to include everything you've ever done. We want to make sure that the information we're including is helping advance your qualifications and your candidacy for whatever role you're applying for. And so if there are things in there or projects that you worked on that are just kind of not really relevant, leave them out, because anything we're including that's not relevant is taking focus away from the work that is. So, be selective about what you're including. If you had several internships early in your career, or part-time roles or things like that don't really have anything to do with what you're looking for now, or what you've done in the past, or what, the type of work you're looking for, leave them out, because it's just not helping. And then that kind of brings me to avoiding ageism and handling employment gaps. We'll take these one at a time. But unfortunately, ageism is alive and well, and people are judged on maybe their age in the workforce. I know it's a big issue in the U.S. So there are some things you can do to avoid ageism. When at all possible, leave your education dates off, and just leave them off of everything. Leave them off of all of your education and degrees. It's not really necessary. Just showing that you have the degree should be enough. The other thing that you want to do is make sure that if you have a long career, it's best to include, your early, your most recent experience back to about 15 years or so. And then after that, your work is a little bit less relevant after 15 years or so anyway. It's probably not as senior level as the work that you're doing now. And so you can still list company names and titles, but leave dates off. So what I like to do is list 15 years out, and then at the end, add early career experience includes, and then add the company name, title, and then maybe a bullet or two about what you did there. But it can take up a lot less space on your resume because it's earlier career experience anyway. But if there's company names, that are prominent that you want to make sure you don't lose in your career, then that's a way to include them without adding dates that may age your experience. Anything in the mid 90s and before is really going to age some things, and that won't be helpful. So don't include things that are going to, potentially be unhelpful in your job search. And all right, I know that was fast. Like I said, I've got some templates that you can kind of go through them piece by piece, but now I'd love to take questions from the audience, because I know there's a lot of things we could go through in, LinkedIn best practices, cover letters, more information on resumes. So I'm happy to stay as long as you need and answer any questions you have.